"Mom, so you don't have to strain yourself, you know. Could you let me know the PIN for your Social Security account?" It was one evening, just 1 week after I'd moved in with my eldest son and his wife. I was sitting on the living room couch, sipping some tea. That's when my daughter-in-law brought it up, as if it were nothing, just idle chat. The words caught in my throat before I could answer, but she didn't wait for a reply. Instead, she landed the next blow right away. "If you can't trust us, I'm afraid we'll just have to ask you to leave this house." That was the moment I saw it, clear as day, what lay behind the chain called trust. I stood up, managing a quiet smile, and I said, "All right. But let me tell you just one thing. I never changed the deed when I built this house. The property's still in my name." Suddenly, the sound of the TV in the background seemed to fade away, pushed into the distance. As the air in the room turned icy among the family, that is when my real story truly began. My name is Margaret Summers. This year, I turned 76. I lost my husband over 20 years ago and raised my kids on my own from then on. He died right after his 50th birthday, caught in an accident at the construction site where he worked. It happened so quickly. One moment we were a family, the next, I was a widow. That day still visits me in dreams. The blindingly white hallways at the hospital, the death certificate the nurse presented, shoved at me unexpectedly. My own tear-stained face in the window of the city bus I rode home. This is no time for crying. I must have told myself that a dozen times that night. My younger son was still in high school back then. Tuition, living expenses. There was no one I could rely on but myself. That's when I decided I would live with my own two hands and never be a burden to anyone. When my husband was alive, I'd started a small sewing class in our neighborhood. I'd teach women in town how to use dressmaking patterns for blouses and skirts. It was simple, but it made me happy. But after my husband died, there was no longer room for instruction. Making ends meet meant making clothes to sell. That's how we survived. I rented a little shop on a side street in a small upstate New York town, nothing fancy for the sign, nothing flashy at all. Yet, thankfully, the old regulars kept coming. With their support, I was able to keep going, even if just scraping by. Up at 5 a.m., checking supply receipts, threading the sewing machine, sewing straight through lunch. In between, I'd pack the kids' lunches and hang the laundry out to dry. By late afternoon, I'd walk to the local grocery store. That was my daily grind. It was no glamorous life, but it was plenty for me. So long as at least one customer told me, "Margaret, your clothes are the softest, most comfortable things I own," it gave meaning to picking up the needle the next morning. Both my sons helped out a lot. They'd help carry deliveries or set out the fabric bolts in the shop window. Honestly, I didn't even have the luxury to nag them about studying. Still, the boys grew up straight, never going too far astray. My eldest, Michael. He was always quiet, like me. He kept his spots close, and you never really knew what was on his mind. But around the house, he'd always be the first one up, vacuuming the living room before anyone else stirred. When Michael started college, I considered closing the shop entirely just to focus on him. I still remember his words, "Mom, keep doing what you love. That's what you taught us." Those words carried me through more than a few late nights. But of course, nothing lasts forever. As I drifted past 70, I began to sense it myself. My arms felt heavier when carrying groceries. Each time the needle slipped under my fingers, a tingle shot up my hand. It's probably time to slow down, I told myself. Still, actually quitting, that was another matter. Then came last spring. I fell on the stairs. The injury was minor, thank goodness. But at that moment I thought, maybe this is the sign I need. That night, I made up my mind to close my shop. When I posted the closing notice, a couple of my customers even cried. "Thank you for all these years. No one made clothes I liked as much as you." Just those words alone made me feel like my life had amounted to something. At the very same time, though, something else nudged me quietly. Maybe, just maybe, now it was my turn to lean on someone. A few weeks later, Michael called me. "Hey Mom, why not come stay with us? You don't have to push yourself anymore." His voice, well, it had a tenderness I hadn't heard in a long while. I wound up mumbling, "Thank you, honey," before I even thought about it. Part of the reason I said yes, of course, was my health. And yes, I wanted to see my grandchildren's faces for once too. But above all, I felt, for the first time in ages, I might finally be able to slip back into a real family. So, that's how I came to move in with my son and his wife. In the beginning, I truly believed, now, at last, my quiet, peaceful retirement can start. Never in a million years could I have imagined it would drain my spirit instead. I packed only the bare essentials into my suitcase. A well-worn apron from years ago. The photo of my late husband, our last family picture together, and my passbook for my Social Security account with years' worth of careful savings. No more working now, I'd told myself. Just let me live quietly, listening to family chatter, and I'll be content. To this day, I'll never forget the first minutes I set foot in their home. With those hopes in my heart. Was family welcome? Always so hushed and so cold? On moving day, I woke up before sunrise. I made a simple breakfast out of leftovers and cleaned my small house a final time. I couldn't leave until everything was spotless. After over 20 years in that little house, I whispered, "Thank you," to each room as I gently locked the front door. The walk to the train station was brisk. The wind kissed my cheeks but felt less comforting, more like a reminder I was alone in the world again, but I kept saying to myself, "It's all right. From here on out, I'll be with family." Clutching the handle of my carry-on tighter, I climbed onto the train, headed for a new life. Michael picked me up at the station in his car. "Mom, you barely brought anything," he laughed, flashing the same eager smile he had as a boy. "Didn't need much, honey," I replied, climbing into the front seat. On the drive, we chatted about little things, stories of him and his brother as kids, funny memories of dinners we used to share. But when we pulled up to the house and the front door opened, a small prickling of unease ran through me. It was Michael's wife, Alice, who welcomed me. She bowed her head, hands folded, and said, "Please come in." "Mom, don't be shy. Make yourself at home." On the surface, there was nothing wrong with her words. In fact, they were polite and perfectly proper. And yet, for some reason, something felt just a little off. There was something about the smile on Alice's face that first afternoon, a crisp, pretty smile, gently lifting her cheeks, but her eyes were absolutely still and cold. Even as her lips curled politely, her gaze didn't match. It felt, strangely, like she was smiling because she ought to, more than because she wanted to. Not cruel exactly, but formal and distant, the kind of smile you give a stranger at the office, not your mother-in-law moving in for good. I caught myself thinking, maybe she just isn't used to all this yet. I'd better do my part not to make things awkward. Trying to brush the uneasy thought aside, I stepped through the front door into my son's bright, freshly painted entryway. The move-in didn't take long, less than an hour really. I unpacked my few things and set them away in the upstairs spare room they prepared for me. The room itself was sunlit all afternoon, mostly empty but for a neat twin bed covered in a simple quilt, a narrow dresser, and a window looking out over rows of neat backyards and magnolia trees. The whole place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Clean and orderly, everything in its place. I stood for a moment at the window with a quiet sense of thanks, grateful for their efforts. But then, cautious by habit, I reached into my old tote bag and carefully drew out my own set of chopsticks brought from home out of custom and a little bowl I'd used for years. I set them quietly in a bureau drawer. Perhaps it was silly, but I felt, somehow, it'd be best if I used my own things, at least for now. When evening came, the air in the house warmed and filled with the smell of herbs and simmering food from the kitchen. I listened for a call. "Dinner's ready." Then made my way down the carpeted stairs and into the living room. The dining table was already set. 3 places, neatly arranged, cutlery lined up, glasses glinting in the light. Michael, Alice, and their teenage son each had a plate, utensils, napkin, and a bowl of stew ladled out with care. Every setting was exact and tidy. But there was no place set for me. For a moment I just stood there. "Oh?" I managed to say, forcing a quick, gentle smile as if nothing was amiss. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "Did you want me to wait to eat? Or did I miss a place setting?" Alice looked up, lips lifting a bit, the same practiced smile as before. "Oh, sorry, Margaret. I must have overlooked setting yours out. Let me get it right now." But she didn't rise from her seat, or even so much as head toward the cupboards. Not wanting to make a fuss, I simply retreated to the foyer, opened my bag, and brought back my own utensils and bowl, taking a seat quietly at the end of the table. When I looked up, Alice glanced my way only briefly before turning her gaze firmly away, her face already back to polite blankness. The chill in her eyes tightened something in my chest. Still, the meal passed, not entirely awkward, not quite comfortable. We ate. Michael talked a little about work. Their son scrolled his phone. I listened, careful not to take up too much space or push for conversation. Later that night, back in my small upstairs room with the window cracked open. To the night air, I lay on the twin bed, awake for a long time. I rolled over, pulling the blanket close, and tried to steady my breathing. From downstairs, the sound of two voices. The kitchen must have been just beneath my room. I could make out the soft, conspiratorial tone of Alice speaking to Michael. "I thought she'd bring way more stuff," Alice was saying. "Yeah. I figured we'd need to clear the garage or something, but she hardly had a suitcase. By the way, have you ever asked how much she gets from Social Security? I doubt she gets much. She just taught sewing classes in town forever, right? Bet her savings aren't anything to write home about." The words sliced through the dark, so sharp they startled me. I closed my eyes tight, hands trembling, and willed my heart to slow. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice wondered, am I really wanted here? Or am I just something to be looked after, monitored, managed? From that moment, even as I tried to focus on gratitude, a small doubt began to settle in around the edges of my mind. The next morning, 3 places were set at the table again. No one seemed to think anything was wrong. Without a word, I took a small side plate from the stack on the counter and ladled myself some oatmeal. I poured my own cup of coffee, careful not to spill. No one commented. They ate, chatted about school and work. It was as if it was always like this. I managed a wry little smile, thinking, maybe this isn't a matter of everyone being polite. Maybe I'm simply invisible. From that point on, my habits changed by degrees. I learned not to initiate conversation unless someone spoke to me first. Not to move around the house unless it seemed strictly necessary. I let my feelings sink way down, and I practiced being, well, not much more than part of the background. Eventually, even my own smiles faded to only my lips, not my eyes or my cheeks. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror one afternoon and realized my smile had become just like Alice's. A mask. The phrase occurred to me again and again. I was living in a house as neither guest nor family, just someone softly, politely set aside. By the end of the first week, I was mostly used to it. At first, I'd flinched at every little odd feeling, each stray word or lack of notice. But human nature is strange. The mind can numb itself when ignored often enough. The oddness itself faded, its sharp edges worn smooth with repetition. My days took on a rhythm, rise with the sun, listen for voices downstairs before venturing out. In the kitchen, I'd quietly open the fridge, heat up a scrap of leftover food, and eat alone or alongside the others if the timing worked. If not, I'd simply eat later in my room. No one asked if I slept well or what my plans for the day were, and soon enough, I stopped wondering whether they would. It's not so bad, I told myself, smoothing my covers. Quiet can be nice for a change. Yet every so often, a sudden chilly morning, or the sun setting behind the maples, I'd feel a wave of loneliness, like I was an outsider living in someone else's carefully arranged house. One afternoon, a few days into my new life, I was sitting at the little bric-a-brac table in my bedroom, sewing by hand. My eyes were not what they used to be, and the stitches took longer than before. But the movements calmed me. I let myself get lost in the quiet click of the needle, the slow, careful drawing of the thread. A small knock came at the door, 2 quick, gentle raps. "Margaret, are you there?" It was Alice's voice, softer than usual. "Yes, come in, dear," I answered, laying down my sewing. The door eased open, revealing Alice standing with a small wooden tray on it, a steaming mug of chamomile tea and a single lemon cookie. "I brought you a little treat," she said, her voice gentle and almost warm. "Thought you might want a break." For a second, I was startled, caught between suspicion and hope. I smoothed my skirt and smiled a little. "Thank you, that's kind of you." I took the tray carefully, balancing it in my lap. Alice hovered in the doorway, not coming all the way into the room. Somehow, she seemed softer than at the dinner table. "I always admired how you can pass the time with your hands. Just sewing or sipping tea," she said. "I wish I could be like that sometimes, content with quiet work, not needing a dozen distractions." Her words soothed me for a moment. "Shoo!" It felt almost like we were having our first true conversation. "It settles my nerves," I replied. "These little habits, they keep my spirits up." There was a pause, just long enough for me to draw a real breath, and then, "So, Margaret, the password for your Social Security account. Do you remember what it is? You know, for the bank." At first, I didn't even grasp what she was asking. "I'm sorry. What?" It seemed unreal, out of place. She smiled in that careful, practiced way. "Sorry, it's just, with all the utility bills and groceries lately, and you getting older and all, I thought, maybe it's easier if I help manage your account. Just for peace of mind, you know, in case anything ever happened." Her tone was sweet, her posture unthreatening, but her eyes weren't smiling. For a heartbeat, I looked down, watching the steam curl up from the mug. "I appreciate your concern," I said quietly, "but I can still manage my own accounts for now." Alice's mouth tightened a little, her lips going pale for a moment. "Oh, of course. I know you're still capable. I just thought it'd save some trouble down the road. Never hurts to be prepared, right?" Her smile returned, and then she retreated down the hallway. I sipped my tea in silence, feeling a coldness settle in my chest, spreading out from a single point. At that moment, I realized this was not about manners or concern or even practicality. The ground on which the house stood, the lines between family and obligation, had begun to quietly shift, and I felt myself sliding imperceptibly away from all that was familiar. Still clutching the mug, I said, "Thank you for worrying, but I'm fine. Don't give it another thought." Then I raised the tea to my lips, but my hands shook just a little. Enough that I took a steadying breath and held it there, listening to the slow tick of the clock on the wall as the sun continued its slow path across the suburban afternoon. The faint taste of bitterness and fragrance in that evening's tea only sharpened the way real life can sometimes feel heavier because of gentle, everyday things. It was as if the weight of reality pressed close, settling with me under the lamplit hush of my son's home. That night, after slipping into bed, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake for hours, staring up at the ceiling's gentle slopes, the familiar cracks swirling like silent rivers. What drifted across my thoughts was not the present, nor even the major milestones of my past, but a memory from a lifetime ago, a younger me standing with a wrinkled $20 bill clutched in my palm, nervously waiting for the weekly sale at the local grocery store in our old town in upstate New York. "Just a little more, just a little better if I can," I used to whisper to myself, weighing each can of beans, each loaf of bread. That's how I'd always tried to live-stretch every penny, earn every small joy, build a life piece by careful piece. And yet, lying there, I realized the strange truth. Even the little savings I'd worked so hard for all these years had been transformed in my heart from a hopeful nest egg into something else, a treasure I now felt I must defend, even from those nearest to me. That realization stung fiercely. There was a loneliness to it. Yes, and also a burning sense of frustration. Wasn't I supposed to have earned, by now, the right to rest? Why did it instead feel like I was being silently cornered, turned into just another resource to be fought over? The next morning, I woke earlier than anyone else in the house. The early sun streaked dusty gold through the window blinds. Moving quietly, I reached into the closet where I'd hidden my handbag. I tucked myself into the shadowed corner, opened the bag, and checked the familiar, battered folder where I kept my bank passbook and that old rubber stamp, a relic from days when check signatures were required at the bank. I carefully looked through my things and, feeling reassured, tucked everything back exactly where it belonged. For good measure, I placed an old, faded handkerchief, sterling blue, embroidered in a pattern I'd stitched decades ago, over the bag as a covering. As I straightened up, a thought settled into me like a quiet anchor. Not yet. No one else is going to touch this. That single stubborn heartbeat. That's what kept me afloat. It became, in those days, the seawall against the tide that threatened to sweep me away. It was then, in that hush before the world woke, that I understood a truth I'd never seen in my younger years. Behind every polite mask, behind kindness, there often lurks a quiet little desire, something called self-interest, or perhaps, more sharply, convenience. It wasn't always meant to hurt, but it changed the air between us all the same. That evening's cup of tea, that prodding question about my accounts, disguised in warmth, brought with it the hardest question of all. The one I did not want to have asked, by anyone, even by my own heart. What am I to this family? What is my value here, really? Time drifted by in the new house. A few days passed quietly. Alice, my daughter-in-law, didn't mention the password again. No one brought up the conversation that had left that chill in the air. Yet from then on, a kind of thin-laced silence seemed to cling between us. See-through film stretched over each day. Sometimes, I'd notice it in the smallest moments. If I reached for a basket of laundry, or bent to fold towels before the others returned. "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll take care of the laundry, Margaret," Alice would call out with that same crisp, undisturbed smile. But her voice was too quick, the intent plain behind the friendliness. "Don't meddle. Leave this, don't get involved." I always returned her smile, lightly. "Sorry, habit, I guess. Hard to keep still," I'd say. But somewhere deep down, I felt the borders of belonging shrinking with each exchange. A careful, polite line drawn a little closer, little by little, with every day that passed. Another morning, I sat at the far edge of the dining table, reading the morning paper as was my custom. The sun made diamonds across my black coffee. Behind me in the kitchen, I overheard voices, lower than usual. "Hey, Mom's been home all the time lately, huh?" "Well, she retired. Guess it can't be helped," but still. There was more to those words than what they said aloud. I heard it in the sigh, the small click of the silverware. She's done her part. So why does she still need to be here? She's not working anymore. She doesn't really, do anything. I sat, hands folded quietly atop the classifieds, and wondered, if I am only seen through that lens, someone taking up space, no longer earning, no longer producing, then what, exactly, is left for me here? Was I a guest? A burden? Or simply invisible altogether? That afternoon, I shuffled carefully down the stairs and stepped outside for the mail. The steps were cold underfoot, and as I opened the mailbox, inside was a single envelope, a small letter from a friend I hadn't seen in many years, someone from the old days, before my boys were grown. "Are you doing well?" the letter began. "My daughter had her first baby recently, you know. People say she looks just like me. Makes me oddly proud they notice things like that." The lines swam gently across the paper, written in a slow, deliberate hand. As I read, I felt a sudden tightness spring into my throat, and tears threatened to be told you resemble someone you love, that you carry the trace of connection, something about you worth inheriting, it is no small thing. Who am I like these days? I found myself wondering. And who would I even wish to resemble? That question, gentle but persistent, echoed somewhere inside, deep enough for no one else to hear. When night fell, I found myself in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when my eyes caught on a list taped quietly inside one of the cabinets, a food pantry inventory, written in neat block letters. It logged the dates, items, and who had purchased each thing, down to the dollar and the brand name. As I scanned the list, it occurred to me, Nowhere did my own purchases appear. It was as if, within this house, my errands and my daily actions had been erased before they could even be noticed, rendered invisible, all over again. It was right then, inside my chest, that I heard it. A quiet click, almost like a box being locked. Something inside me shifted. It's time, I realized. I need to start preparing. I won't wait anymore. Instead of dodging the silent questions or pretending not to see them, I would take real action. No more hiding or waiting for permission. I did not know yet what I'd do, but I knew this. The time for me to answer, openly and in full view, would come very soon. That evening, a heavy layer of clouds pressed down against the sky, muting the world in a dirty gray. Inside the house, the air was cool enough that I pulled my cardigan tighter, shivering despite myself. Dinner's smell, a fillet of fish crisped under the broiler, filled the kitchen. I sat at the table, quietly, as plates were set before me. The meal was a simple spread-salted mackerel, cubed tofu, a thin broth of soup, and steamed rice. Nothing fussy, but nothing lacking either. Yet, that night, every single bite tasted flat and dull, bland, barely warm, each dish sinking in my mouth. It was not the food. It was the air, that awkward squeezing tightness that choked every word between us. Alice picked up her chopsticks. No, her fork now. Everything American. Every custom, paused, then set them back down with a muted clatter. Her eyes met mine, level and clear for once, without any veil of ceremony. "Mom," she said, her tone clipped and cold. Nothing soft about it now. "Are you ever going to give us the PIN for your bank account?" Her voice could have cut glass. Gone was the courtesy, the warmth. It was businesslike, demanding. I traced my finger along the rim of my bowl, brushing away a final fleck of rice. "I'm sorry, Alice," I replied, slow and steady. "That's just not something I can give you." I barely got the words out before, crack. Alice slammed down her fork and knife on the tabletop. The echo bounced around the silent room. "Fine. If you don't trust us, then what's the point of even living here?" she all but shouted, pushing her chair back with a scrape. "If you won't believe in us, then there's no room for you in this house. You need to leave." For an instant, everything froze. No one moved, not even to breathe. I looked across the table at Michael, my eldest boy. His face bent low, eyes glued to his plate. He did not speak, did not look at me, did not lift a hand to calm anyone down. He just sat there, silent, turning invisible, even more so than me. Watching him sit so still, I felt something inside me begin to shatter, quietly but completely. I let my gaze fall back to my plate. All I could see was the now cold fish and the nearly dried-out pickles left behind. There were no tears. I did not even feel like crying. Instead, a steady calm crept into my voice as I stood, my chair scraping gently behind me. "If that's how it is, then I understand." I looked square at Alice, not flinching. "It is not about trust, or not. If you're telling me there's no place for me in this family anymore, then I will go. I will leave, and I will not return." My hands didn't shake, and my voice held firm, quiet, but with a weight that could not be undone. I took a step toward the doorway, but then, on some instinct, I paused. Turning back, I added just one more thing. "But please listen." My eyes lingered on them both. Alice, tight-jawed in the kitchen doorway, Michael, hiding behind his silence. "Tomorrow, someone will come here in my place. When they arrive, please sit down and speak with them. Listen to what they have to say." At that, the room grew starkly tense, like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Alice's eyes flickered, a tiny crack in her confidence showing through. Michael did not move. Not once. Without another word, I left the kitchen and climbed the stairs slowly to my room. It was time to pack. I opened the old dresser and neatly folded my belongings. An old cardigan, worn thin but soft, a small handbag, just big enough for keys, and a cell phone. The faded photograph of my husband, the only one where all four of us smiled together. I wrapped the photo, my husband's quiet memory, carefully in a towel. The silence in the house stretched out behind me. But each sweep of my hands across those old familiar things was steady and, sure, a rhythm I had known all my life. And for the first time in a very long time, as I placed each piece into my suitcase, I felt myself growing lighter, emptier, and, perhaps at last, a bit freer. Only what I truly need. Anything else, I can leave behind. I had already made that decision. Quiet, steady, final. I stood by my suitcase, carefully tucking my old belongings inside. As I moved from corner to corner of my small upstairs room, my eyes wandered to the window. I paused and gazed out. It was late. The darkness of night lay softly over the quiet street. Through a thin break in the clouds, the moon peered down, a pale, round face keeping its distance but shining all the same. The moon's gentle light seemed to say, "So, you finally made up your mind." It didn't judge or pity, simply observed, steady and calm. Its quiet presence soothed me, as if some witness was standing by for this long-awaited ending. Midnight settled like a hush inside the house. Everyone else was asleep, or pretending to be. Alone, I sat at my desk by the wall, a crisp white sheet of stationery in front of me, my favorite for writing notes I never meant to send. Tonight, though, I wrote only a single line. Money can be divided. Once trust is lost, it's not so easily returned. I slid the note into an envelope and left it on the sideboard right beside the narrow little shelf under the hallway mirror, where someone would notice it only after I was already gone. I was done speaking. No more arguments, no more explanations. If any line needed to be marked, it would be left quietly in writing this one last time. I hoped that, maybe, my words would help fix the boundary others no longer seemed to see. I turned off the lamp and crawled under my thin quilt. Sleep would not find me easily tonight. I listened instead to the house, the faint shifts and creaks, the sounds from downstairs, someone setting down a glass, a chair sliding quietly back, bits of muffled conversation drifting up. Will she really go tomorrow? I don't know, but when she speaks like that, well, maybe she means it this time. Their voices were soft, barely above a whisper. But every syllable carried. Maybe it surprised them, me leaving words instead of more pleading, or silence instead of complaints. Or maybe, deep down, they'd always assumed she'd never actually do anything like that. Maybe they'd never taken me seriously at all, but I felt so clearly now that I no longer cared if they misunderstood. Their opinions, their judgments, their expectations, I had released myself from the job of mending them. I only needed to make one truth clear, for myself, if for no one else. This is no longer my home. That, simply, quietly, was all I needed to know. The clock ticked past 2. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the dark. Finally, I slid gently from bed and tiptoed to the window, shivering in my slippers as I reached for my old planner. The pages were well worn, heavy with the scribbles of so many years. Inside, I'd gathered every scrap, records of household expenses from years running my sewing shop in New York, bits and pieces of property paperwork, printouts, rubber-banded bank statements, my careful trail of proof. I organized each piece slowly, checking and rechecking the history. There were notes from long ago, the life insurance my husband left behind, the savings I scraped together over 2 decades, the chunk I gave Michael and Alice as my support when they bought this very house, the legal documents listing every share and mortgage detail, things there. Through the glass pane, I watched the moon retreat behind a shifting line of clouds. The city outside barely stirring. This is enough. I said it out loud, voice barely more than a whisper. I bundled the records, put them in a fresh envelope, and placed them on my suitcase, ready for whatever the visitor I'd mentioned would need. Would Michael and Alice be startled? Surely, but for me, the fear and uncertainty had all flowed away. This was what it meant to act with my whole heart, without anger or regret, just the steady certainty that now was the right time to set myself free. Before dawn, I decided to walk through the house one last time. The living room was dark. On the table, the glasses from last night's dinner still lingered. The kitchen sink was full of dishes left untouched, It was the routine mess of a family's morning, nothing special or unusual. But as I looked around, I found, once again, nowhere in that everyday landscape belonged to me. Tucked near the sink, my teacup sat unwashed, forgotten. As if I'd flickered out of their memory already. I touched the rim softly. "Thank you," I murmured, voice snagging in my throat. "Thank you for letting me be myself, until the end." That was all. I crept back up the stairs. The faintest lines of sunrise gathered over the rooftops, the sky just starting to glow in the east. I sat on the edge of my bed, the envelope full of old documents beside me, and thought about how small my world had become. But how much lighter I felt at that moment. One more piece of stationery. I wrote again, this time, to the ones who'd stay when I was gone. My last message, as Mom. I'm not angry, but I have to protect myself. I still hope with all my heart that my son's future doesn't lie on a path where trust is lost forever. I slipped my message in with the first. I set my pen down, drew back the curtains, and let the cold, early air fill my chest. Sorrow swept through me, but greater than sorrow, there was relief, this deep, gentle ease that came from letting go. The next turn of the doorknob would not bring me back. But someone standing in my place? Someone who would carry my choices into words? And law, whether or not my family wanted to understand. That, too, I believed, would serve as a sort of wake-up call for this house. As much for them as for me. Somewhere inside, I knew it was right. When morning finally arrived, it did so quietly. I got up before the others and busied myself filling the last gaps in my suitcase. Folded sweaters, my Social Security passbook tucked in a new envelope, the old black and white photo of my husband, a thimble-sized sewing kit I'd used most of my life. The letter, unsealed, lay on top my final words, in plain view. Pulling open the heavy curtains, I let in the pale, gentle sunlight of a new day. The sky outside was clear and cool, a silence before the coming storm. And then, the doorbell rang. It was barely 7:03 a.m. No one visited at this hour, not here. I moved quietly down the stairs, heart thumping, and answered the door. Standing on the porch was a middle-aged man in a neat, dark suit. He carried a slim briefcase, and his eyes looked from me to the silent hallway over my shoulder. "Good morning, Mrs. Summers. Sorry to call so early. I'm from Morgan and Harris Law Offices. I'm here today on behalf of my client, Margaret Summers, to explain some important paperwork." I nodded, stepped aside. "Please, come in. The whole family should be here now." Michael and Alice shuffled into the living room in their pajamas, sleep still fogging their faces. Shock flickered as they registered our guest, but I said just one thing. "This gentleman will be doing the talking today." The attorney placed his folder on the coffee table, unclicked the lock. He laid out a neat stack of copies, speaking quietly, firmly. "These documents concern the title, deed, and mortgage of this property. Currently, Mrs. Summers owns approximately 80% of the house under her name. The remaining 20% is listed as a joint holding in her son's name." Alice fell silent, her face draining of color. But the mortgage? Michael and I have been paying it, doesn't that count?" she stammered. The attorney explained gently. "Yes, you and your husband have made regular mortgage payments. However, the initial down payment and closing costs, totaling roughly US $50,000, came from Mrs. Biss's Summers' personal savings, built over the last 30 years. That's why most of the current equity belongs to her." Michael sat with his hands folded, eyes never leaving the speckled rug. For a long moment, I looked down at the crisp, official print. Then I spoke. Quietly, firmly, but with a softness that never wavered. "I'm sorry it has to be like this. I wish it didn't have to come down to paperwork and numbers. But this isn't about anger. It's about facts, about what's real, about confirming what's already been true all these years." My tone was steady. Not loud, not cold, just final. As a mother, I wanted to believe. I wanted so much to hold on to the bond between us. But those words you both spoke, right here at this table, meant the end of trust for me. A hush filled the house. No tears. Only the slow drift of sunlight wandering across the floor. I watched my son and his wife, their faces tight with surprise and, maybe, the first edge of regret. I let the silence stretch, not rushing to fill it. Inside myself, I repeated the only truth that still held any warmth, what I needed. I had already found, not in this house, but in the choice to step forward, to protect my dignity, to trust in my own hands once more. And so, with nothing left to lose, I stood tall and faced the coming day. That's why. I just needed you to understand this one thing. My daughter-in-law, Alice, sat there, face pale as snow. She gripped the edge of the dining table so tightly her knuckles stood out sharp and white. Not once did she try to argue with the attorney's explanation. She remained frozen, rooted to her spot. My son, Michael, head bowed, shoulders hunched, let out a small, broken whisper. "Mom," his voice cracked like a rusty old hinge. I heard it, and my heart answered him softly, though I kept my voice steady and gentle. "It's all right. I'm not angry, sweetheart. I'm not upset. I just can't trust and leave things in your care anymore. That's all." I looked at both of them, Alice and Michael, the faces that were once closest to mine in this world. "This house, it's yours now. If you need me to, I'll help with the paperwork to change the deed. I have nothing left that I want to hold on to anymore. Nothing." As those words left my mouth, Alice's head jerked up. Her lips quivered. "If that's true, then why did you call in this man?" I answered her quietly, without bitterness. "Because you said? I can't live with someone I don't trust. I wanted to make sure that what's trusted and what isn't was plain to see. Out in the open, not hidden in the corners. Just that. If I were truly angry, I would have taken you to court. I would have filed suit. But I didn't choose that path. I still wanted, even at the end, to remain your mother. Nothing else." A hush settled over the whole house. After the attorney finished his last explanations and stacked his papers, nobody made a move. Not for a long time. The documents, thick with numbers and heavy words, lay in perfect piles atop the table, silent witnesses to what had been lost between us. The room itself was frozen. Time seemed to stall out right then and there. I quietly excused myself, rose from my chair, and stepped into the kitchen. There in the little kitchen, muscle memory guided me. I filled the kettle, let the water heat up, and spooned loose tea leaves into a small old teapot. The familiar sound of the kettle's bubble, the moment's pause as I poured the water over the leaves, it all felt like tracing back over the ghostly patterns of family time, the ordinary routines we'd once shared. All that was left of it somehow lived in those simple habits. 3 cups, laid on a tray. I brought them back to the living room. "Your mouths must be dry by now. Let's have some tea. Take a moment." No one reached for a cup. Not Michael, not Alice. It was all right. I waited anyway. I would not push, nor would I withdraw the offer. There's something a person learns when she has nothing left to lose. Once there's nothing more that can be taken from you, the fear of giving vanishes, dissolving into the air. When you're done being afraid, you can simply extend what's left. A cup of tea, a few words of kindness, or maybe just your presence. So even if no one touched the cups, I wished, just for my own heart, if nothing more, that this last tea I made in this home would stay a peaceful memory. Alice's hand trembled. I watched the small shiver travel through her fingers, a tight, uncertain line of energy. Was it anger, shock, or perhaps the first stirrings of understanding, at last, working their way in? I couldn't tell for sure. Her hand moved just slightly, like someone reaching out for something precious but unable to grasp it. Not just yet. That's how it seemed, at least to me. Michael finally cleared his throat, the heaviness of the moment clear in each breath. "Mom," he said, "thank you for everything until now." The words, I'll be honest, felt as fragile as autumn leaves, not nearly enough to change the course of an entire room, let alone the course of a lifetime. Yet even so, hearing him say them loosened something inside me. A little quiet warmth, a gentle easing deep in my chest. I smiled back, faint but sincere. "Thank you too, son. I was grateful every day for the chance to be your mom." I started to wonder, maybe people only understand the true weight of words at life's final moments. Maybe it's only when something is ending that we see just how heavy a thank you can be. But I still believe it's never too late to say what matters. For that reason, what I chose that day was not to scold, not to fight, not to throw words back. I chose just to step away in quietness, head held high. The attorney stood up, quietly collected his folders and briefcase, and gave a small, respectful nod. That concludes my explanation for today. When you're ready to begin the actual paperwork, please contact my office. I'll guide you through the process. I stood as well. My suitcase waited by the doorway, everything I owned zipped inside. I took up the worn leather handle. Well, I'm off now. Take care of yourselves, both of you. I turned toward the front door. Nobody called my name. Not Michael, not Alice. The house was silent behind me. I stepped outside. The sky, to my surprise, was bright and wide open. Sunlight spilled everywhere, clear and golden. The heavy air of the past few days was gone, swept away as if by magic. In its place, the morning sun shimmered, and the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood, the bark of a dog, the hum of distant traffic filled the air. I found myself breathing deeper, steadier. As I trundled my suitcase along the sidewalk, the wheels softly clicked against the pavement. For the first time in some time, my steps felt certain, my heart no longer aching with confusion. In that moment, quietly to myself, I spoke to my late husband, just as I did for years, in small moments alone. Well, John, I hope this was the right way. I really intended to slip out quietly, without a word. But then, I realized, that would never have made them understand. Sometimes, you have to leave proof behind. The sound of my suitcase wheels rolling along the fresh blacktop rang out in the stillness, a stubborn, clear music. That morning is one I know I'll never forget. After the lawyer left, after the official papers were laid out, the house behind me had become only a place, no longer a home. I knew there was nowhere left in those walls to belong, no role left for Mom to play. As I zipped shut the suitcase, gathering up what little was mine, it felt as though the lines between endings and beginnings had quietly crossed. No apology needed, and no accusation waiting to be answered. Only a clear, quiet closing of the curtain on a role I'd played almost my whole life. Once the door closed at my back, I didn't look over my shoulder. Not once. Old advice ran through my mind, words that had guided my hands for decades at the sewing machine. If you keep looking back, your thread will tangle. You have to cut the cloth and leave the edge neat. I knew, or hoped at least, that everything behind me could become a good memory. The kitchen's warm scents, the gentle mist over morning coffee. When you let go, when you let it all become the past, you discover the simple relief of moving forward again. So I kept walking, step by steady step, to the local bus station. As I walked, I told myself, this time is yours. Make it count. From that day forward, my life changed completely. Now, I live in a small apartment in Brooklyn, a second-floor walk-up in an old, wooden house a good mile from the waterfront. The plaster walls crack in the winter, and on rainy days, I have to dry my laundry inside, draping it over the old radiator. Still, it's easier to breathe here than anywhere else I've been. These days, I keep only what matters, my husband's picture by the sunny window, a small bouquet of fabric flowers I hand-stitched last fall, a pothos plant, green and bright on the kitchen shelf. My mattress lies right on the floor. But that's enough. It's all I need. Life is not exactly rich. I live mostly on Social Security and careful stretching of what I saved, approx. US $2,000 a month, less if bills run high. I have little, but I have freedom. Most mornings, I boil a little water for tea or drink a cup of hot water, just for the comfort of it. Sometimes, I steam spinach or stir up a simple breakfast at my small stove. Volunteering fills up my days. There's a community senior center down the block where I help out, folding paper for little art projects or teaching folks to mend shirts and hem skirts. I find it gives shape to the days. We trade stories or show off a new pattern, No one ever looks at me like a resource or talks about assets. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm just another person in the room, no one source of income or someone to lean on. One afternoon, staff at the center paused by my table and asked, "Margaret, how are you always so calm? So gently, steady? You never seem ruffled by anything." I thought a moment, then smiled. I suppose I only learned how to live quietly. Just that. But quiet takes its own kind of strength. Maybe that's what you're seeing. She nodded, frowning softly. I wish I could be more like you. I keep arguing with my mom these days. Somehow, no matter what we start talking about, it all turns back to money. Nothing else seems to matter anymore. Hearing her say that struck a note deep in my heart, a small, sharp ache. It was as though my own story, my old pain, echoed right back at me in another's words. I whispered, silently, inside my chest, "It's not because we don't have enough that we're afraid. It's because we lose our trust, because we can't believe in each other anymore." That's when fear comes. That's what I believe now, more than anything else. Life hasn't become easy. I have worries, sick days, money tight, an occasional twinge of loneliness. The city can feel too big, the apartment too small. But here, at last, I can close my eyes at night without thinking of all the ways I might be reduced as asset or responsibility in someone else's eyes. Now, when I tend to my plant or hem a torn tablecloth, the air is still and filled with sun. Soft, empty, just mine. Someday, maybe, Michael and Alice will think back. Maybe they'll understand why I left. Not in anger, never with hate, but only because I wanted to hold on to what little dignity I had, and to believe again that trust is something worth protecting. That morning, the morning I walked out into the sunlight with only my suitcase, and a heart no longer stranded, I truly began again. That is the small, ordinary truth of it. I am Margaret Summers. Once a mother, still a woman, and now, finally free. Once a month, I make a point of walking along the riverside path not far from my apartment. It's a little something I give myself, a gentler kind of pleasure than what I used to need, a comforting, steadying ritual. For me, the Hudson River's breeze always carries a bittersweet familiarity. It's as if the wind quietly links the woman I am now with, the younger self who once struggled alongside its banks, uncertain and hopeful in equal measure. One sunny afternoon, I found myself pausing on a bench there, overlooking the walking trail. I set my handbag down, opened my little planner, and almost unconsciously took up my pen. That day, I wrote only a single line, a sentence to no one but myself. Trust is not the same as surrender. To stand side by side, without giving yourself away, is its own form of faith. No one was meant to see those words. I didn't even read them over once they were written. But in that moment, I understood more deeply than ever. As a mother, as a woman, as a person, I want to continue living that way. It's the only conviction I have left, and it gives me the courage to keep moving forward. Even now, those words return to me, sometimes in dreams woven together with half-remembered days. Sometimes I dream of when my oldest boy was small, tiny shirts. I sewed him. Little jeans left to dry over the old radiator. A kitchen rich with the smell of curry and his honest laughter when he asked for thirds. In my sleep, I return to those moments, my voice clear and strong, my laughter full-bellied and unguarded, my tears hot and real. I wake beneath my quilt and spend a long minute staring at the ceiling, letting the feelings swirl through me. Was it loss? Or did I let go, all on my own? Most days, I think it was neither. I believe, now, it was just the quiet work of finally becoming honest with myself most of all. I've started writing letters these last few years, letters with no destination, no address. I slip each one, unsealed, into the last page of my journal. Some days, the sentences are brief. Today, I got through without doubting myself. Today, someone said thank you for the first time. Today, I felt a little lonely, but that's all right. Every line is meant for the woman I'm learning to become. A record kept for my own heart, a thread I follow back to myself. My name is Margaret Summers. I'm 76 years old. For the first time, maybe ever. I feel like I'm truly living by and for myself alone. Looking back, I see how it went. I gave up anger, set aside old grief, let go of material things. What's left is something plain and spare. A small, quiet life, a handful of unsent letters, and a solitary certainty. I choose trust. A trust that asks nothing in return. Even if I never see the people I care for again, I want to hold on to that. Just for me. I live now in a little apartment not far from the river, on a sleepy street near the heart of Brooklyn. Each morning, light creeps through my east-facing window, soft and pale, and in the afternoons, shadow drifts slowly across the neighboring rooftops, quietly marking the passage of time. It's such a small thing, but it's plenty. It's enough. It's been over 20 years since I retired. The duties of motherhood, of being both caretaker and helper, faded quietly away a while back. The role of wife finished much earlier, left behind with my husband's passing. Still, I remain. I am still here. I am still Margaret. At 76, my mind and heart surprise me, blooming in faint, new ways each day. What stirs and budges in me isn't payback, and it's not regret. It's more like a gentle kind of blankness, a soft, open space I never knew I needed. Leaving Michael and Alice's home, for a while my hands seemed to falter without warning. I'd find myself going still on the subway platform, watching a young mother tuck a snack into her child's pocket, or in the grocery store, seeing an older woman reach for a family-size carton, then put it quietly back on the shelf. Each time, a quiet memory unfurled. That used to be me. Back then, I poured everything into doing for others. It became so routine, so natural, that I didn't even see how I disappeared in the process. These days, I don't force myself to be, or want to be, indispensable for someone else. Instead, I try to cherish the small moments I share with others, just as equals. Nothing owed, nothing required. That's why, twice a week, I volunteer at the local senior center. There's a crafts club where we piece together little tote bags, coin purses, or stitch small pillows for the city's kids. Sometimes folks call out across the room, "Margaret? You sure handle a needle differently than the rest of us." Every time I hear it, a flicker of warmth glows inside, and I feel grateful not because I'm needed, but because I still have something to offer. One afternoon, a young staff member lingered at my table and asked, "Mrs. Summers, how do you stay so calm? Isn't it hard living on your own? Doesn't it get lonely?" I gave her a gentle smile. It would be a lie to say I never feel lonely. But loneliness isn't something I can blame on anyone. And these days, I don't want to hold grudges anymore. I'm not trying to forgive anybody, I just don't want my heart to get heavy with anger ever again. Just saying the words was a quiet shock to my system. The moment they left my lips, my mind settled, calmer and more open. No letter ever comes from Michael or Alice. The phone doesn't ring for me, not anymore. But somehow, that's fine too. I no longer try to force ties that hurt or chase love I have to beg for. I fully believe, when it matters most, what we're meant to face will always find us. That's why I put aside both my anger and my expectations. Just letting them fall away, maybe the day will come when we meet again naturally, with no explanations needed. One bright morning in March, I decided on a whim to cook for everyone at the center's potluck classic dishes. I used to make for my boys chicken and rice casserole, stewed butternut, garlic green beans, and a good, smoky chowder. I set the food out and said, "Today, this isn't anyone's private table. It's ours. Everyone's welcome." As we gathered around the table, laughter bubbled up, easy as breathing. For once, there was no head of the table, no names called, just an ordinary meal, shared among neighbors who happened to show up. In that simple togetherness, I thought I glimpsed, for a second, a piece of what I'd always longed for in family, not the perfection, but the feeling, the delicate bond of folks staying close, as they are. After we ate, I took a breath and offered a few words. We each have our own stories. Please, don't blame yourself or anyone else for drifting apart. And if you're brave enough to come back, in your own way, that alone is proof of your strength. Someone at the table looked up, eyes shining. Margaret, you must be the strongest person in the whole room. I felt the sting of tears then, a small, honest ache, but managed to smile. No, I'm just someone who finally chose peace instead of holding on to old hurts. Nothing in my life sparkles now. My bank account won't impress anyone. At times I worry about what will happen if I get sick or lose my savings. But every night, as I turn the lamp on low and read an essay or two before sleep, I know at last where my true wealth lies. In this time, this breathing space, these precious days that are just my own. Life, I've learned, is strange. The harder you fight to protect something, the easier it slips away. But let go, and sometimes what's meant for you will finally come within reach. All the years in the old house, the good and the hard, have receded now, like the backdrop to another person's play. No, I won't look back. But if anyone should ask again, someday, about my choices, if they really want to know, I'll answer simply, yes, I chose to start fresh, not as punishment for anyone else, but to protect the only thing I have left, my own heart. If you're out there reading this on the other side of the screen, maybe you too once had a cherished place you left behind. When you parted ways, how did it feel? On that night when no one understood, when you sat quietly, longing for kindness. Remember this. It wasn't running away when you stood up with quiet determination. It was the first real step forward. My name is Margaret Summers. I'm no longer mom or wife or anything but myself. Today, that is enough. I have learned to live with no more apologies. And if somewhere, someone else's heart is trembling now, I hope you know, you're not alone. Trust yourself and let your next steps be your own. The courage that lives in silence is invisible to the world, yet it always holds the power to change someone's life, just as it did mine. Sometimes, all it takes is a quiet act of resolve, an unspoken refusal, or a single moment when you choose to honor yourself, even if no one is watching. These are rarely heroic gestures. Few people ever know about them. But in each of us, there's a kind of bravery that grows in the stillness, soft, but unbreakable, that pushes us to step forward, even when it means letting go of everything we thought defined us. Looking back, I realize now there is a strength in silent endurance, and an even greater strength in choosing your own way, against all expectations. My life was transformed, not by grand words, but by simple, steadfast choices made on evenings when my heart was heaviest and the house was quiet as a dream. That's what I want to tell you. For the sake of anyone out there listening, wherever you are, know this: your quiet courage matters. It may not look like much to the world, but it just might shape the very course of your days, and maybe, one day, someone else's life as well. It did for me. And that gentle, steady, and unseen is more than enough.